So, a friend of mine who's in a cohort that I'm part of, we've been noticing a little bit of tension the last few months. Actually, I'd say almost the entire year. And we've been trying to be civil to each other. We've been working with each other. We both love each other dearly and have high respect for one another. This individual has been making decisions that put me in a place where I didn't feel comfortable with, like, hey, I would have liked it if you'd asked me beforehand. So I was getting frustrated that this person was making plans and was deciding this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, we who? Like, I wasn't consulted on this. And you put me in this position where you're resentful of me because I'm not showing you proper appreciation for what you're doing for me, even though what you're doing for me is really wonderful and really amazing and your love language. And this individual was feeling hurt because he felt like I wasn't actually acknowledging the importance of what was being done on my behalf to support me and make room for me and what I was dealing with. In other words, we were both parallel in being super stressed with life and work and the universe and everything. Very little bandwidth for the difficult challenges of conflict in life. Speaking different languages for showing support to one another. And hadn't talked about it until it kind of boiled over to the point where this individual was constantly just stewing in his uses about the whole thing and was very frustrated. Normally, I'm, as you know, someone who's like, okay, great, let's talk it out, let's deal with that. But even with my desire for dialogical growth, there are times when I am not in a place where I can hear critiques, where I can address situations with which I am also frustrated in a way that will allow for that growth to happen. I'm sure none of you ever struggle with that short-temperedness or short bandwidth. However, he'd been nagging me for a while, like, hey, can we meet? I'm like, oh my God, okay, yeah, sure, let's meet, okay. And we talked for 2.5 hours. But we were able to lay out our grievances together in a way that we could hear it. We listened to what the other person's experience was, even though we both recognized that the way we perceived it was not the way the other person perceived it, and that what we were upset about were reasons that were justifiable in how we saw it, but without the other person's input and perspective and context for why they were behaving that way, we would have kept being loggerheads and loggerheads and loggerheads. Now, imagine if this individual demanded that we have this conversation in front of that whole cohort before talking one-on-one. How well do you think that would go? Yeah, probably not very well. Even if I was in the most like, okay, I'm going to be patient with you, there's still the pressure of other people in that conversation, making it difficult to allow for that vulnerability, especially if the trust isn't quite as strong as it could be. I've also experienced times where I've tried to challenge people on things, they refused to hear me, and they left, or I had to leave communities, or it ended up in situations where I was scapegoated in a community and had to deal with being the brunt of other people's ire. Not a pleasant experience. Not following this formula. But I've grown up hearing this formula over and over again, and it's one of the areas of Scripture that I am most profoundly excited about when it comes to addressing conflict in community. When you don't have deep connection, when you don't have deep trust, is conflict something that is easy to address? No. This is why this passage is really important to remind us about what it means to be in beloved community and why Paul's letter to the Romans is addressing the key linchpin for how to address conflict. I've heard the expression, well, I'm just having righteous anger about this person, as a way of saying, I don't like the fact that they're not giving money my way, or I disagree with them, and so I'm going to use my religion or my righteousness to justify my position against them. Or I'm just speaking the truth in love. You can speak the truth in love, but if you're speaking the truth in love, you're not really speaking the truth in love. You're being a self-righteous jerk, and that's not helpful. I know this because I have seen me do it. But oftentimes, conflict festers and becomes septic and poisons an entire community. And that usually happens when either people are unable or unwilling to address conflict, or don't know how to be able to be okay with the fact that there are things that we all need to work on together. But it involves a level of trust, a level of commitment, and a prioritization of that love of one another that is not often found in the world. So, why would going one-to-one with a person be important? Well, first of all, you can actually hash out the situation that is already between the two of you anyway, or the two of us, if it were with me, in a way that allows for the conversation to be private, to be appropriately addressed to the individuals in the conversation. It also gives an opportunity for us to get to know one another better and figure out how best to take care of one another without shaming each other, without causing harm to one another. On the other hand, if we go into the one-to-one conversation, like, let me tell you how you're wrong, that's not really going to work either, because it's more about being right than it is about working through what's at stake here. To use CMM language, the most important thing is the issue, not the relationship. The relationship must always come first whenever possible, unless that person flat out refuses to even engage with you. Have you ever had that where you tried to address a conflict with someone in a gentle way and they threw it back in your face rudely? I think all of us have. Well, in that case, that person is not willing to address the situation as equals or as two people without anyone else in the mix. That's when you bring in one or two other people. Now, when you bring one or two other people in, do you bring in people that agree with you so you can make sure you can prove that you're right and they're wrong? Well, you shouldn't. But on the other hand, you shouldn't also bring people that agree with them over and against you to make sure that they have all the room. Neutrality is important in that situation. Mutual love and affection where this person cares about both of you equally in this conflict and can maybe mediate. Maybe say, wait, I'm not sure that's what they said. Hang on a minute. Slowing the process down. I remember being asked by a mentor one time when I was in an argument with one of my housemates in Boston. He's like, do you two ever stop to breathe? Do you ever stop to think? To take silence? And we're like, why would we do that? We're both young Southerners in our 20s, like loggerheads with each other, super fast thinking and like trying to prove our points. Oh my gosh. Slowing that down. It's very important. And again, sometimes you just got to take that space. Calm down, mull it over, marinate in it, and then come back and bring it to the conversation. Now, if you bring people who are supporting both of you in the situation to actually address the conflict and they still won't come to you, or still won't even listen to you, or still throw it in your face, then, only then do you bring it in front of the whole community. However, the problem with this is that if you don't have a community that guarantees support and trust of one another, it is a very dangerous thing to bring these things in front of the community. And this is one of the great failings of the church writ large throughout history, is that lack of deep connective tissue that makes that possible, where the whole community will embrace this person while challenging them. And then, if they still refuse, treat them as a tax collector and a Gentile. Now that sounds bad. That sounds horrible. Like, you're an outsider now. We've shun the non-believer, shun, which is from a silly cartoon on the internet. But that sense of like rejection. No. What was Matthew again? What was his trade? Tax collector. Oh. Who was Paul's mission to? Gentiles. The Gentiles. Treat them as not integrally into this community, but still beloved of God, still truly part of our family ultimately. And that is not easy, especially when the person who has refused is being an absolute jerk, a horrible person, poisoning the well, treating everyone with disdain, self-righteousness, anger, hypocrisy, you name it. And that is where Paul's reminder comes in. All of this is wrapped in the arms of the love of God, the love of neighbor, and the love of self. Where we hold boundaries for ourselves, we hold boundaries for our community, and we continue to seek God in that person, seeking to see where God is trying to lead all of us in growth together. Once again, that is one of the key components. That is one of the key components to making sure that we as a church are a powerful prophetic witness to the world. That kind of love, that kind of conflict resolution, that kind of connection to one another, that kind of vulnerability is possible and takes work. But it is one of the most profoundly transformative experiences one will ever experience in life. So may we, particularly if you got that person that you're kind of frustrated with or you're not sure what to do with, if that conversation is able to be had, address that with them at a time when both of you are able to listen. See where that goes. Or if you're a person with whom someone else has conflict and you haven't necessarily been able to hear what they're saying, or maybe you didn't want to hear what they were saying because you knew they might be right and you had to deal with it, giving room for that vulnerability to admit when we are incomplete. Never fully wrong, always incomplete in our perspectives. And most of all, continue to tighten those sinews, tighten those connections in this community, building that trust, building that relationship, building that vulnerability so that we can make opportunities for growth out of conflict an everyday occurrence rather than the exception to the rule. Because with my conversation with my cohort friend, we ended up releasing so much stress on both of our backs because we were able to listen to one another. And we both committed to ways we can grow together. May we embrace that courageous and difficult spot to make that kind of love in the world grow more. Amen.